a time to be alive.
Maybe one of these fucking napkins.
Yeah, dude.
What's our movie today?
Welcome back. Yeah, we're doing Sound of Metal. It's directed by Darius Marder and co-written by him, who, I don't know if you've seen The Place Beyond the Pines.
No.
It's a good movie. He co-wrote that.
Okay.
So the premise of the film is that this heavy metal drummer suffers severe hearing loss, and it's really sort of like an odyssey watching him try to either
Cope with it.
yeah, well, and I guess that's the main
And
story.
it's really just his journey with acceptance, right?
Yes.
With his hearing loss, tinnitus.
Yeah. So as far as those kind of like, we're at a point where an Oscar movie is absolutely its own genre.
Yeah.
These things have a formula. Where I hear all the time that like a Marvel movie is brain candy, or that if that's the metaphor we're going with, these movies are fucking chicken breast and broccoli. Which is good for you for the most part.
But I don't want to eat it every day.
Right. Some are more flavored than others. I would say that as far as, whatever the ceiling on how interesting that can be is, this movie probably gets as close to that. I want to point out that it was nominated for all of the big boy Oscar awards, and it won Best Sound and Best Editing, which, as far as just gun to your head, someone tells you that, you did not see every 2020 movie, but someone comes to you and says, this is the movie that has the best sound and the best editing. Do you feel like that's reasonable?
Easily. Well, actually, for me, I'll just put it out here first. It would be my pick for best movie of the year.
Really?
Of
the nominations.
Of the nominations, right? What's your reaction to that? Would you also agree with that?
Yeah,
or was there one that you like more?
I've been kind of mulling that over, and it's such a...
The nominees are awful.
I mean, I know that this is just every year, and I try to not get, I'm like, oh, this year they're really bad. They're always bad. They're always bland. It's always...
Not always. Okay, sometimes
Sometimes
there are ones that you're like, oh, this one's
sometimes
actually
you'll get the interesting nomination that everyone knows doesn't have a chance to win, but they threw it in to keep it. But like, I don't even think they had that this year. But insofar as like, this was a year of movies that were Oscar nominations that were all sort of windows into like, you take a community or a person or a specific struggle that maybe hasn't had as much light shined on it, and you just tell a very straightforward story about it. That's no.
Yeah, but going back to this one specifically.
Yeah. But that's what it is. So I think that this one particularly was handled with the most empathy and the most, tailoring the. It's funny talking about this after we talk about Bo Burnham, because there's actually weirdly similar a couple of threads here that I think carry through, and it's that idea of like. I do think that there's only so many ideas, and there's only so many, like, there are only so many stories, there are only so many concepts, and I think that at a certain point, unless you're Christopher Nolan and you really try to just, throw everything at the wall.
Recreate that.
Yeah, right. Unless that's your MO, it matters a lot more how you're going to tell the story than what the story is you're going to tell. And a lot of these Oscar movies do settle on like, well, it's a very serious drama about someone with dementia. It's like, all right, but is it... What are the mechanics of this? And this one particularly felt like it, at least, that's where you get best sound. Like it really did take a hard turn.
Sounding is incredible in this movie.
Yeah,
and it's necessary, right? Because you don't really understand what the person is going through. What's his name again?
Ruben, the drummer.
What Ruben is going through until you actually live his experience through the sound, and especially like how the sound changes. Right, is reflective on how. Where he is progressing in his journey. And
I'll say that they do a good job of like frustrating you and giving you that, there's that very upsetting scene where he's listening to his girlfriend sing, and it's clearly this beautiful thing, and he'd rather not get anything than this horrifying, distorted,
yeah, exactly.
So that idea of like adjusting to your own, like the new, well, I guess,
well, it's a movie about also, which I really like, about hope, right? Where he is hopeful that there's going to be a magical cure it's able to be fixed. He just needs to raise enough money to get the cure, and obviously when he actually gets it, shocker, not everything is perfect, right? But I think what it does an impressive job doing, which a lot of movies do, right, is that they're just going to focus on one guy, right, his journey, and kind of like the emotional toll it's taking on him. And I think to really I think part of the formula for an Oscar movie is have two characters, focus on kind of the emotional depth, and then show a really big change of where they started up in the beginning to where they start at the end, and then you have a non.
And I will say it to that end, it is a lean movie. I mean, it's not. We were just talking about King of Staten Island, which is like in many ways the antithesis of this movie.
Right.
That's a movie where we're just watching a character do stuff, and it's like all a murky, not in a negative way necessarily, but like it's all just stuff happening next to each other and living in a world. Whereas it's this man's journey from point A to point B, and if whatever's happening is not in direct service of like showing us what this adjustment period is like or what the possible solutions could be, then it doesn't make it in, which is respectable enough for something that takes on such a specific.
It's a predictable movie, but I think also for me what carries it is his performance, right?
Yes.
Riz's performance, right?
Yeah,
it's that it's absolutely incredible, and I just really bought into his character from the very start.
Yeah.
And because I cared actually deeply about the character, that's why I was invested in his struggle.
And they do a good job early on, and he does a good job helping. You know, I think it's the whole apparatus directing, but his performance has to be the thing that nails it home. We were introduced to him as a pretty controlled person. You know, we get his workout regimen early on, and he lives in his trailer. But that's his, like, he has complete kind of
He's a drummer, right? Everything is very predictable for him. He just wants to kind of live that steady life.
So even beyond the obvious irony of like, well, now you can't hear the music that you're playing, it's also that like he's got such a, you know, because he's such a sort of bohemian, he's got like he has to control what he can, and then to have this hand dealt. So that's a good, like, I at least appreciate that angle on it. But
see, like for me, it's what you have to do, right? Is yes, it's a very kind of cookie cutter story in that. All right, I know that this is going to be someone that encounters, you know, his life changes completely opposite, and how is he going to reconcile that, right? It's a very like kind of ABC walkthrough movie. But then for me, it's like what spices. Going back to the chicken metaphor, are you gonna throw on it? And for this movie, it's obviously the sound editing, which we've already discussed, right? Really brings you into his world. The acting is number 2. And also, I thought it was 3. I liked how they were kind of showing spaces that you might not otherwise be familiar with. So in other words, like the sign language community.
Sure.
I was relatively, maybe I know a slight bit about it, but like I didn't realize there was also in the sign language community like an acceptance or a way of life that you're actually transforming and looking about.
That idea of we're not disabled.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they touch on that pretty lightly. I thought they could have dug way harder if they wanted to. It was almost like they were afraid of actually getting too deep into it, right?
Yeah.
It was almost like, no, this is our main protagonist story. Let's not touch anything else. Right? But at least there was some kind of flares, which I can go and Google and go to our favorite Wikipedia afterwards.
But there's almost a quality to it where like there's something nice about the fact that it is that entire world is a little tangential to his story in that, like, you know, spoilers.
No, come on, no spoilers.
Spoilers?
No spoilers.
Very hard to.
Come on.
It's not a plot heavy movie.
That's why we can't talk about it.
All right, so then I'll say the resolution of the deaf community that the whatever, I don't know what the term would be for that specific house or that that specific community, but you know, the resolution of that part of the story is a little bit quick and a little bit...
Yeah, it's definitely jarring.
But I sort of appreciated that because it gave me a little bit more, like... It's weird to say this because we just talked about how lean and in service of his journey everything is, but it did make me... It's almost like these characters and this community are streaming along with him to the end point of the movie until they're not, and then instead of, like, convening, they just fall off and they're in their own... I think it made me think a little bit more about that community and their... You know, it's hard to talk about without going into details.
I have no idea what you're saying. No, no, I get what you mean. Yeah. No, like everything is, I do think, in service to him. Yeah. But I almost like that because that's kind of how life is, right? It's like, well, I'm gonna go flashback to some character I met before.
Right.
No, it's like after I left the community, I left, and I'm kind of progressing with this kind of new way of life. No, but I also thought there's also kind of the girlfriend piece, which they also don't really hit on that hard. I thought that could have been developed slightly more. Like, it's like I'm not really invested in the girlfriend that much because I only met her for 2 minutes.
Well, that's the trade-off that something lean like this makes, is that you don't have that investment. You don't have emotional investment in her. The actress,
fine job, right?
Olivia Cook, I believe her name is. She did a fine job, but she's not the center of this. But even at that, you don't have that emotional investment. But I still thought that the addition of, the way that their story resolves with each other was actually sort of, it did tie nicely back to that idea of like acceptance and continuing. And it was a nice bittersweet moment of not trying to lie to yourself and pretend that whatever the tools you had at one point or the situation you were in at one point are the same that you have now. And that was done, again, so straightforward. There's nothing, there's no revelation here. I think the thesis of these types of movies is that instead of reinventing the wheel, you're just making a very good wheel. And it's going to get you where you need to go. So in that sense, like we're in such an era of like, and I'm not even going to open the Pandora's box of Zack Snyder. We'll talk about him in depth at some point. But like, we are in an era of like filmmakers who will just make these bombastic, massive movies that touch on everything, and there's a little bit of, and that is its own experience. That's a different. There's value to that, but like, it is nice to just see a movie where you have a main character who has a journey, and everything's in service of the journey, and then it ends. And there's no ambiguity. You get finality to it. Not that there's no ambiguity, because you do. It's not. That's what I do. Like I watched this with my parents, and by the end of the movie, there's
a little bit of ambiguity from the end.
But that's what I mean. It's the kind of
journey has ended.
It's not like, what's the sequel gonna be? Like, not a, you don't need to know what happens next to appreciate what the story was.
And I kind of like movies like that because, it's like I want to feel at the end satisfied, and I don't need, and no story is going to give me all the answers, by the end. And so I kind of, the best movies, I often think a lot about just kind of endings to movies. Like, did this movie end well? And I do think that this movie kind of nails the ending because you can make a logical guess of how the rest of his life is going to work, right? Yes. And I don't need you to give it to me on a silver platter, right? I just want you to give me the tools, which I've developed through the movie, to be able to say to myself, you know what, this is probably what I think is going to happen. Right? I think that's a perfect, and that's why, when the movie ended, my mom was like, did he go back to the community? I was like, maybe. It could have happened. Within the, what the movie gives you, sure. And that is either the, whether or not that makes the point more salient for you, maybe that is what happens, or maybe it's not. Yeah. But more important is, emotionally where he lands, and you can logically figure out what he's equipped with. He could do one of 3 things. Yeah, and I also like that. I feel like that a lot of times, if we have a character going through a physical struggle, it's tough to really get into that character's mindset. And obviously, not to rehash the sound editing part, but for a visual art form such as movies, right, which I primarily think of a visual kind of component of it, it's really nice to have a movie kind of show what it would look like for sound being your biggest issue. And it's an interesting point because you're kind of almost using a different visual aspect to kind of show light on a different sensory experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. And it's a tough game to play too when you're now contending with my parents they didn't set their sound up very well. Most people at home now, everybody's watching these movies at home, and you're just at the mercy of however somebody's TV settings are. And that permeates visuals as well, but if your tint setting is too high, that's not going to affect the framing of a shot. So the cinematography is a little less scathed by that than maybe the sound with someone who just has their, and I'm not a sound guy, I don't know what the ins and outs of it would be.
Right. I had a great sound setup when I watched it, which I think obviously enhanced the experience a lot. But I do like, I almost liked how it was unforgiving in saying if you don't have a great sound setup, this movie is not going to be that great for you.
Right. They just kind of owned that and went, that's that just making an assumption that you have to make to move forward and then continuing on.
Yeah.
I do want to, I want to touch on, we're burying the lead crazy by bringing it up now, but we somehow miraculously both have tinnitus. Which should be, but we missed the boat. We should have capitalized it. This could have been a podcast about two tinnitus
It's not all our struggles.
But and I mean, you more than me, you've had like struggles.
Yeah,
with
definitely,
hearing.
for sure.
So I'm curious, like, I always wonder about movies that take, there's universality in specificity, and you're not really making a movie like this because you're like, part of it is you want to tell a story about people who maybe are overlooked a lot of the time or highlight a struggle, but really you're looking for universality in it. And I'm curious how much of that was like, did you feel like there was another element to it?
Definitely.
On that end?
Yeah. I guess also, I mean, that's obviously the personal reason why I really loved the movie is because I felt like I connected the character and did have some shared experiences, right? And it was I did find it tough to be able to articulate, what I was going through to people. Yeah. So just having the movie being like, go watch this. This is actually what kind of happened to me.
Right. Well, yeah. Right? Now you just have a frame of reference.
Yeah. I mean, that's one. And two, which I wish the movie hit harder, is that you don't have to be a heavy metal drummer for that to happen to you. Like, this is not fake at all. Like, you could easily lose your hearing immediately just by going to a couple loud concerts, like a couple nights in a row. And I thought that it was almost glossed over a little bit. Like, I wish that people take away from the movie, like, this is like a real thing that could easily happen to you, right? And I mean, obviously, like, you can wear earplugs. There's musicians' earplugs, right, that just make the sound. Your like Apple Watch, right, will notify you if sound is too loud. But also, I wish that the movie hit a little bit harder. Like, yes, okay, this is someone else's experience, but there's actually ways that this experience might become yours, and these are ways to prevent it a little bit. I wish that was the final piece that the movie was able to capture. But
that's interesting. Like, isn't that interesting that it becomes, because that didn't feel like it was, the movie didn't feel like a PSA, and it felt like it was using. Not like in an exploitative way, but it was using hearing loss and that story as a vehicle to talk about hope and whatever. But then as someone who's kind of on the inside of it, you're like, well, if we're doing this,
can we go all in?
There's more to talk about
here,
which is interesting. And you would think, like, in the deaf community, when you go to that portion of the film, like, and it goes back to just telling a lean story, and that's why this is not incorporated. But like, that is an opportunity to explore, why different people are there, what their individual stories are, and maybe you would like to hear someone who wasn't a heavy metal drummer,
right, just lost it.
Someone who was a guy that was around, and now they can't.
Who was a fan, right?
But and it was like, I do think we've had different experiences with hearing, but like for my own, like, journey with tinnitus is there is like there is an acceptance, like, adjusting to your literal concept of silence having to change. Like, there's no more silence, there's now relative silence, which is a weird idea. And it's funny to me that again, there's spoiler. I'm gonna spoil it.
No, do not.
All right, the ending of the movie is like it had me kind of mulling that over my head and like playing with the concept of like what
I'm protecting so many people from spoilers of this movie. Dude.
Watch the movie. Pause it and go watch the movie. It's good. Watch it. You could skip. We're gonna put a time code and go skip. That's the review.
Yeah, there's gonna be a quiz down the middle of our fucking show, and you have to get them all right to proceed. Spoiler sections. Anyway, no, Sound of Metal, definitely worth a watch, I think. Sure. I certainly, there's going to be some people that dislike it.
Although it's hard to come away passionately disliking it, I would imagine. It is, I feel like...
Unless you just watch the rest of the Oscar nominees.
Right.
And you're just like, I can't believe they did this to me.
That's because you're going to have a hard time telling them apart at some point. Why did Nomadland end with the ear stuff? That sounds like a harsh note to end a positive review on. Definitely check it out. It got an Oscar nomination. You should watch it anyway.